Dude, honestly, if it wasn't for the kids, I wouldn't mind doing that. But I think the happy medium would be like I don't know, maybe a co-working space.
Yeah. I think it's hard for the people with the kids. You could hear the kids in the background.
Yeah, it's so fucking difficult, dude. Because the thing is, you're half baked on both things. You can't, you're not really being productive, and also you're the arsehole in the house because you're not really dedicating any time. And like, dude, I've literally got my daughter there. Klaus, are we going? Or okay, all right. So yeah, we're rolling.
Okay.
But I'm doing stuff at home at the moment, but I have like situations where if you're trying to think, it can be very difficult because normally you have the luxury of silence, or even if you put headphones on, you kind of blur out everything else. But then you've got your daughter sitting next to you, kicking off and going, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, look what's happening on Peppa Pig," And I'm like, don't give a fuck, but they get so excited, and you have to then stop yourself from being an arsehole, because that is really important to them.
Yeah, they don't quite get that you're like in a meeting right now, or
I'm not even in a meeting, but I'm just trying to concentrate on something, and with like my ADD, it's like, I really struggle with it.
It's kind of the same at work though. When someone like asks me to see something on the internet, I'm just like, nah, dude, leave me alone.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
So, dude, I wanted to ask you something. With regards to school, like we've got a whole bunch of places now that you can go and study or car design, which was maybe not the case, like, I don't know, 15 years ago. But there's a couple of schools that kind of stand out. And I have to say that Art Centre is definitely one of them. I was interested to know how much you think that amount of money that you paid to study at that institution paid off.
Definitely paid off. I think, so when you realize that there are other avenues to get into the car business, like when I don't know how old I was probably like 17, 16 when I really started doing research on this stuff. And then like at that point, almost every single designer that was like running the show somewhere, it was like, oh, where did they study? They studied in Art Center. And especially like BMW was kind of like the hot thing at that point. So you've got...
What, design works or?
In general, like all you had to do is like, if you think about where do you want to work and you go, all right, I want to work at BMW. You try to like do some research. It wasn't like now where you can actually kind of figure out who's running the show where. But you do a little bit of research and you figure out this dude, Chris Bangle, is running BMW. All right, the next stage is like, where did he go to school?
Okay.
And then you're like, all right, he went to school at Art Center. And then you do a little bit more research on Art Center. And then they got this like pamphlet with all these faces. And they seem like they're running almost every studio in the world. Oh, so you're like, okay, so basically I should be at Art Center if I want to get into this. Of course, in hindsight, you kind of realize that there were other avenues to go. But yeah, in terms of like, was it worth the money? Definitely worth the money, but it's still a lot of money.
But is it $80,000 a year? No, how much is it?
I don't even know actually.
Like roughly, ballpark. Don't talk to me in terms or semesters because I don't fucking know what that means.
Let me think. So you've got, all right, now I have to do the calculation. Like my father at my grad show was like walking around and telling people that he paid like $500,000 for my education. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was primarily on like a decent amount of scholarship. And then basically I think I walked out with like 50-something thousand. And
that's not bad. I mean,
nuts.
considering what some of the other people walk out with. I mean,
exactly.
Wasn't Albert like double that? Or I mean,
yeah, I don't even know.
It was fucking crazy amounts of money.
But I know some people definitely have like a lot more. So, but still, I think at the end of it, it's kind of worth it. Like when you really think about the number that you came in at, because I remember like the teachers would tell you how much they paid to go to school there. And they were like, oh, it was crazy at that time. And you're like, oh yeah, it was $3,000 a year. Yeah, that's really crazy. So, no, I think like, all right, let's say when I got in, it was like about 15K per term, which is about 30 something per year. Or sorry,
Okay.
yeah, you do about 2 terms a year or 3
Okay,
terms a
so
year.
it's like 30 grand a year, roughly, ballpark.
30 to 40 something.
Okay.
That still sounds like a lot right now, but I'm pretty sure by the time, I don't know, I'm like 40, students will be laughing at me and being like, that wasn't a lot. So,
But what I'm interested to know, like I guess in America in general, that's kind of that's not actually even a lot, right? I mean,
no, that is a lot.
that is a lot, right?
Yeah, like it was once listed as like the most expensive school in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the second part to that question then is like, what would you say? What did you get out of that experience? Was the system or the teaching methods or the quality of tutors that you had there, were they really superior? Was it like, you with this elite group of people and everybody's pushing each other, so you get out what you get in?
All right, so of course I haven't gone to anywhere else, so I can't really compare to that.
But no,
yeah, to just that like one thing, that's the one thing that's kind of a little bit unique in that place. Like you're around very serious people.
Okay.
Like from the moment you enter, the students tend to be a little bit older. They're all kind of in their, early 20s. So it's not straight out of high school into studying. And then basically, yeah, the environment is already quite serious to begin with.
Okay.
And all the tutors, I don't think it's very rare that you have a tutor who's not working in the car industry. Or an
Okay.
instructor that's not working in the car.
Do you guys have like a revolving cast of visiting lecturers, or is it generally the same people for the 4 years or whatever?
It's generally the same people, but you also have like the revolving cast. So you've got the sponsored projects. Like from day one, it kind of is like an interview. Like it's really strange. Like I realized when I graduated, like a lot of the connections I had was like because of like, you build a reputation of being reliable, like things like that, or like they watch you grow up, so they're like they know more how you're actually going to be when you're in a studio rather than just what's on the portfolio. So they're not just looking at your sketches. So like you kind of understand how that person is with people. Like are they kind of a bit of a drama queen, or are they chill? Like
Okay.
you get a very good idea of who you're hiring.
But that's I mean, it's really good for you as well, because you already, like from day one, you're being exposed to the industry basically.
Yeah, the very first person I went to work for was someone that was one of my instructors at the school.
Okay.
So I'd seen him twice. I'd seen him once at the end of my second year and then at the end of my third year. So basically, this guy kind of saw the progression.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated, he just brought me in for an interview like quite early on. So before I'd even done my grad show, he had like invited me over for an interview, and I was in a room with like him and the other design directors in the studio. And yeah, they'd kind of like made a job offer, and I was just like, no, I'd like to actually wait until I graduate.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just because I
can't imagine that at all. I mean, but it was a different time, I mean, I'm not saying that was wrong. I mean, that's really good to have the feeling that you've got those options available to you, like I think our university had already kind of like, not gone down the pan completely, but they had already started taking on way more students. They had already started just not really investing in the program at all, So basically, every year there would be maybe, I don't know, maximum 6 internships, like mainstream internships, like in proper studios. And that was, you had like 50, 60 people fighting for that, So
Yeah.
it was like, if you get something, you would fucking grab it. And then, of course, like we finished in 2009 and there was nothing, so.
No, the internship is like completely different. Like the first internship, second internship, third, whatever, like you're basically grabbing at whoever is like calling you.
Okay.
So if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity to choose between 2,
Yeah.
you can try to like weigh those 2 things. Which one do you think is a better fit?
Right.
So that's also one of those really cool things about like California. You're exposed to so many different cultures of working.
Yes.
So when you're coming out, like getting that first internship, you can get a very, very, very clear vibe for what the place is like when you're interviewing with the person.
Oh, okay.
So what they
okay.
gravitate to. So if someone is sitting there gravitating towards your renderings, you can kind of get the sense that they're like, that's the way that studio operates. They're looking for a lot of bling. Then if someone's kind of like sitting there flipping through the sketchbook and really into that, you can imagine that that's probably like, that's the way they're working. It's very like, just, can you do it with just line work? And yeah, I think my first interview, though, we talked about cycling a lot. So
okay.
yeah, there's also that personality factor. Like,
yes.
it was after the portfolio, and they were just kind of like, what are you into outside of this?
Okay.
And I was like, that kind of stood out to me. I was like, all right, so they're not completely obsessed with like, it's not 110%. Yeah. Like, of course, they all love cars, but it's not 110% work. And then that kind of like clicked for me. And yeah, I went home thinking like, I was like, all right, I really hope I get this internship.
Okay.
And then that luckily worked out.
Is this in the second year or?
When was this? Yeah, probably beginning of my third year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what I noticed, I mean, I don't know if it's like that in America as well, but in Europe there seems to be like, I've come across multiple students that have done like 4-5 internships, you know, and over like in the UK at least. When I was studying, it was completely different. You know, it was like, if you're lucky, you get one internship, and then if that goes well, then hopefully you'll get a job at the end of it, you know.
Yeah. Did you intern at Jaguar?
No. I interned, I mean, I didn't get in. I mean, to be fair, I didn't really have my shit together at the times that people were applying. I don't even think I sent anything in because I just didn't have a portfolio that was like good enough, you know. But I ended up interning with there's a South African guy that was like the big dick at Jaguar back in the day before Ian Cullum came along, and he was running a project in Cape Town for an electric car company in 2008. So they were like a little bit, you know, I don't know, before the technology was really there. And I interned with them, and it was great. Like, I really fucking enjoyed it. And I was hoping that I would then return to South Africa and go and live, you know, the good life in Cape Town. But the company folded.
Okay.
I think like most startups, I mean, at least at that time, they like grossly underestimated the price of manufacturing and all that stuff. But it seemed really promising at the time because the government was involved, and there was a lot of hype, and it seemed pretty stable. You know, it was going. I mean, it existed for a good I don't know. I don't want to. It was a good few years that it was going. But for me, it was like really. It was a really great opportunity. I mean, I was really excited about it because I'd read about this guy, and he was like one of the guys that I was like, oh wow, like is another South African guy. Like maybe, you know, I could also be, you know, this like one of the few South African guys that's like this rock star, you know. Of course, you know, I've got no desire to be that, and I never had a chance of being like that anyway. But it was a good experience. It was a really good experience. But no.
Did you have a very like when you were in school, did you have like a clear idea of like what kind of products that you wanted to work on?
I was quite naive with the whole thing. I think I had this thing in my head that it's like, it's not okay just to fucking draw sexy sports cars. You know, it's unintelligent, and it needs to be some thought behind it. It needs to be like a proper product that's been researched, and it needs to really solve a problem. And that's a great thing, especially now. But in doing so, I never really focused hard enough on the art of the craft of it, you know, like learning how to really draw well. And unfortunately, when I was at school, all throughout high school, I didn't do anything because I was encouraged by my dad, like, you should go and do an account, you should take accounting, you know, that old chestnut, because that's going to be really fucking useful. But and as a result, I didn't do anything throughout high school. Like, I had kind of an aptitude for art and drawing and stuff at a young age. But then I think that your teen years, I think, are really crucial, because I think that's when if you nurture that talent, it kind of accelerates, you know. And then, of course, you get to university and you realize actually there's 150 other people that are way better than you, and you need to up it again a level just to kind of get the point of entry. So I unfortunately, I was too romantic about, inventing the next whatever, and I didn't focus enough on the craft of it. So I came up with a portfolio of like a whole range of stuff, which was quite interesting from a concept perspective, but in terms of like, nobody cares if it looks like shit, you know.
This was coming out of school or going into school?
No, sorry, coming out of school.
Coming out of school, yeah.
Coming out of university.
Yeah.
Sorry, I that was a bit
no,
long-winded. But so I my portfolio at the end of it was a whole mishmash of stuff. One of the things that was quite interesting in that was I did like these brawn trainers, which I think was like the most attractive thing in my
brawn, like brawn.
Yeah, because they one of our tutors were like introduced us to brawn, like had a real hard on for it because of like Dieter Rams, and then we found out that actually like, you know, all the Apple stuff of that time was being inspired by, which we had no fucking idea about, you know. So it was like, oh, like like that's a really cool thing, you know. Of course, that was back in the 1960s or whatever the case is, and like things have moved on quite a bit. But the task was then to take a brand like that and design a product that they don't currently manufacture, you know, and try and interpret their visual language into a different kind of product. So it's a really interesting project. I just didn't. I think I was pretty unfocused. So by the end of it, the advice given to us by our tutors at the time was like, you should really have like a whole wide range of stuff so that you appeal to more people.
That's the thing. They always tell you to kind of do that. They're all just like, oh yeah, like diversify. But it's like, there's no clear message then in the portfolio. It's like, what does this person like? And then you get out of school and you just hope that someone like really likes one thing. Like that shouldn't be the kind of sales pitch. It's like, you like one of my 5 projects. Yeah. That was, I think, because I got the same advice. Like a lot of people would be like, diversify. And then like, at some point you kind of become a little bit more stubborn and you're just like, no, I'm just going to do this. Like, because this is what I like. And then I think at that point, basically, I had like 3 projects and it kind of looked weird because like if you look at like my graduation wall, it was just 3 different shades of red.
Okay.
And it was 3 different projects just in 3 different shades of red. But each one was like in the nuance, they were actually like quite different. But they're basically just the 3 different facets of my personality. And I was kind of like, all right, if you don't really like this, then it doesn't really matter to me. Because I kind of explored these things here. And it just, at the end, it was actually incredibly well received.
I think that's a really good attitude to adopt. And it's I think, I wish I'd had that insight, like at that stage, you know, when I was finishing university, because I think we were so, I don't want to blame anybody, what you put in is what you're going to get out ultimately. Yeah. It doesn't matter where you fucking study. You know, you need, your skills need to be at a certain level. What I think we were ill-advised on is that, you know, where they say, you should have everything. You know, I was speaking to a friend of mine and he was saying like, you know, if you only want to do sports cars, have a portfolio fucking full of it. You know, only do that. And because I think ultimately, you need to kind of be focused on the thing, on the end results, and then reverse engineer it. You know, and say like, I know it's unlikely that I'm going to get hired by Bugatti to design the next Chiron or by Porsche to do the next 911, but I'm going to fucking go after that, you know, and I'm going to show them that I'm the guy of my generation that is the person that can be nurtured into that role.
You got to be like crazy good. And I knew like a couple of guys like that. It was more like my interest that kind of like made me fall into it. Like for example, if you take if you take like exterior design, definitely not an exterior designer.
But did you know that?
Oh, it was obvious by like fourth term, like, which is end of second year. By that point, it's like, all right, cool, you got some creative ideas, but you can't like, this is genuinely just not for you. Like you're hanging out in this area and clearly you're interested, but you're just not as interested as you are. Like there's just multiple layers of it. And I couldn't kind of get past that first layer. Like maybe if I gave it more time, I probably would have found my rhythm in it. But then like at one point I kind of deviated from that and I just went, all right, cool. You're okay at this, but like then I started doing interiors and that started being really well received. And I found myself like more willing to put in a lot more hours.
Okay.
Granted, I was putting in like, everyone at Art Center is putting in a lot of hours. Like you're already at the max. It's just like what return on your investment are you getting?
Okay.
Like some people, they could hit it in 8 hours. Like perfect sketches, all the best renderings, all that stuff. For me, it was actually like a struggle. There wasn't like that point where you're kind of entering like a nice flow. And then I started doing interiors and then that kind of started to feel right. Like it wasn't that it was perfect right away. If anything, it was actually quite bad, but it was a lane that was, it was a lane where I think I had enough space where I could kind of figure out what I'm into.
Okay.
Like with exteriors, like I was saying, like you have to be like that whole thing, like you're saying, if you want to be a sports car exterior person, you have to be the best sports car exterior person. And then basically you'll be sitting there in class competing against these people and you guys are all following the same format. And then if that format doesn't sync up with you, your chances of actually like falling into your rhythm are quite low.
But how much do you think it is like somebody's got a natural affinity for it versus like, I really understand the proportion of dash to axle and wheelbase and like, you know, body side cabin relationship, you know, because the thing is, it's like, you still have to, even if you've got a natural affinity for it, I mean, from what I've seen, you still need to work your dick off.
Yeah. No, some people are really, really horrible. They figure out the rules and they can just like repeat that formula over and over and over again. And then you always end up with like a very attractive car, but you just end up with something that's actually quite new because they're following that like formulaic approach.
Right.
Then that's what I mean by like finding that space. Like a lot of us, you know, you kind of learn those few rules at the beginning. And then I think that's kind of what sets things a little bit apart is when you find that space to do something where it looks really, really good, but you're adding that little bit of weird. And I could never do that in exteriors.
Okay, because it's like you can totally overcook it, right?
Yeah, I was overcooking all the time.
Okay.
Like, yeah, it just wasn't, I couldn't find that lane. Okay. And then with interiors, there was definitely that moment where like, you cook one that's like by the books and you feel really, really good about that.
Yeah.
And then you cook the next one that has like a little bit of weird. And then for the first time, it was like people were gravitating to that little bit of weird and they were just like, yeah, that's interesting. Like, let's see what you do next. And then the next one's a little bit weirder. Then of course, yeah, you still overcook a few more afterwards because you get a little too confident and you're like, let me do something really strange here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found that space, that like the space that I needed from like the rules and being really dogmatic about it, I found it in there and I could never really quite do that with exteriors.
I've been quite pleasantly surprised by, I think particularly in Germany, where a lot of the exterior designers that I've met have been like actively pursued that career path. Like they said, like, I'm not really interested in doing exteriors.
Interiors,
they're saying I'm not interested in doing exteriors, so I followed the path of doing interiors. And there are instances where they wanted to be exterior designers, but they couldn't find, you know, that lane, as you talked about. But then there are guys who it's not all of them, but I've met a good few that were like adamant from day one, like they really wanted to do interior design.
Yeah, I think that's becoming a little bit more Like you see a lot more of it. But
I think like now, definitely, you know, it's pretty interesting. It's okay, you can do that.
yeah, I'm like,
Sorry, did I touch your leg? There were a couple of guys that I'm repeating myself now, but there were a couple of guys that it was evident that they had no interest in being an exterior designer.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe it's just kind of like, I don't know. I really don't know what drives it. It could just be like you're saying, like when you're in school and you kind of wanted to approach it from that, you could say it's a little bit more of like a product design approach.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of think, you want to do a crap ton of research, you want to do all this stuff, like you want to do all the prep work before you start cooking. And I think you get a little bit more of that with interiors than you do, for example, with exterior. With exterior, it's still like, I may be wrong, but it's still like really, really emotional, like really feeling driven. So that's why you still have like the power of the hot sketch in exterior. Whereas like, to be perfectly honest, in interior, like I see like a hot sketch and for me, I become a little bit, it's fantastic. You've captured my interest, but then like, I'm more looking, is there something new with the architecture? Did you manipulate something in an interesting way? And then that to me is more of the image has to be really beautiful, but if you over exaggerate it too much, if it's more feeling and more flash than it is substance, it becomes a lot more obvious. When you're looking at something, especially like you're looking at something like where a human is sitting inside it. So at some point you kind of have to really look in comparison to the human proportion, and then you're kind of like, all right, some of it here is just a little too strange.
Well, how do you do that in the beginning?
I think that goes back to like that whole thing with being an art center and looking at all like the different cultures of working. Like there were definitely a few interviews where I was like, I will not fit in here. Like you just walk out and you're just like, I don't fit in here. Don't know what they see in me. I'm going somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, there were definitely those. And then there are the ones where you're like, it's kind of like speed dating.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah,
I guess it is. But I think, it's definitely important to find, I think particularly in the beginning, like your first job, if you've got the luxury of choosing, to have like a feeling that these people are going to nurture me, because you need that in the beginning. You really do need that.
That's like a combination of a million things. Like you have to be really lucky to like, not only does it have to be the right working culture, you have to like get lucky enough that you're around the right people at the right moment.
Okay.
All of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's a combination of all of those things, and then you're like smooth sailing.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly, I think it's a lot more rare than, like the percentage of it is less than half.
You mean people getting jobs? Or?
No, of falling into that rhythm. Like being lucky enough that you're at the right place for you, that you're working with the right people that you want to work with, and that you're being nurtured in the right way where you're like, yeah, you're growing up like in the correct way.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely.
And you've had some of that, right?
I've had enough to know when it's there.
Okay.
Which is quite cool. Like, I think I'm incredibly lucky. Like I said, with that first internship, like I fell into the right place at the right time.
Okay.
So at that moment in time, they didn't have any interior designers besides one.
Okay.
Who was just like fucking superstar designer. And he was excited just to have somebody there.
Okay.
And also like his like internal clock, his internal rhythm was off because he was flying from Japan and back to California. So he was staying at the studio really late. And of course, as an intern, what are you doing? You're staying at the studio really late. Yeah, so at that point in time, he had a lot of time to kind of like walk over and give me feedback. And that was actually, but that's what I mean, it's just timing. Okay. Like just because I felt like I'd fit in there in the interview didn't really translate to the fact that he would be just back from Japan and he'd want to like hang out late in the studio. Yeah. And then
I had quite a bit of that as well in the first proper job that I got, and it was also just I don't know, serendipitous or whatever you want to call it. I was also that I got paired up with that particular person. And it was on an interior project as well, and I learned so much. I looking back on it now, it's obvious how fucking green I was, you know. But at the time, you think like you're kind of holding your own, and it's so painfully obvious to this person that they've got to teach you everything. And I'm so grateful now for having that experience, because I realize how fucking difficult it must have been to work with somebody like me, you know, at that stage. You know, I'm difficult to work with anyway, but like if you take into account the fact that I had no idea what I was doing, I was super lucky and really, really grateful to have that experience.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, I think that's cool. It's like that you get the idea that it was all luck that kind of led to that.
Yeah, sure, 100%.
But you said like serendipitous.
Yeah.
But
Did you, this is like the last art center question I'll ask you, but like in terms of actual craft, like what sort of things were they making you do or suggesting that you do to get your skills up to what they need to be? Like I've heard that they make you, that they say you need to draw like fucking 200 lines, straight lines every day. Is that just...
Yeah, there's that stuff, but like, no, I'll go like long form on this, because it's actually, that's kind of the really cool thing, is you're learning things from a very like primitive level. Like, I don't know how it is at other schools, but so for example, you're going to the model shop, they're making you build boxes the first few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're genuinely learning how to use a tool correctly. Doesn't matter what you know from before or whatever, you're learning everything from scratch. Same thing, like you've entered the school with a car portfolio, but what are you doing like those first few Viscom classes? You're drawing boxes and circles and just trying to do
visual communication.
Yeah, just really primitive stuff in those classes. So everyone is kind of on that level playing field, but it's
drawing like ellipses, cubes, and vanishing points, and
you got to like deconstruct the person so that you can kind of like build them to the quality that you want to that degree.
Okay.
Like the first car design class, I think was not really about car design. It was really just about, can you be there on time? Can you put all the work on the wall straight? Can you pick a piece of inspiration and then translate that piece of inspiration into a car?
Right.
Doesn't matter if it looks good. It could look like crap, but does it look like, for example, one dude did a boat and he was really making a point of like, he got it. And basically he just drew a bunch of little circles on the body side, like to emulate the windows on. Yeah. I was just like, all right. Yeah. Perfect critique, that class. And you're sitting there and you're genuinely trying to design, but it's like that first class was just about, can you follow the process?
Okay.
Then the second class, you get into a lot more design, but still very much the same. It's like, can you follow a process?
Okay.
And then the third class, I think, is the very first time like you're actually designing. And that's just like, that's a world of difference.
Okay.
Yeah, like you.
But is it always, like from day one, is it very much like craft focused as well as the intellectual stuff? Because we had a lot of like, on paper, it was a similar sort of thing. You know, it's like no drawing cars in the first year. We're going to learn about, we had various different subjects and everything from like designing tablets, you know, like a dishwasher tablet, and then like we had architectural projects and I don't know, design for manufacturing and learning like the different facets or the different parts of the business.
Mm-hmm.
But at times it was also like, it seemed really unfocused, and in hindsight, like there wasn't really enough focus on craft, or there wasn't really the caliber of teaching to give you those tools that you need to raise the bar to the level that you need to be.
So that's the thing that I would say is kind of like, to some degree, maybe you're paying for the environment. Like, yeah, of course you're going in there and they got like this formulaic approach of getting you to where they want you to be. So what it is that you try to get in, or you get in finally, you're around a bunch of people that want it like so and so bad. Those are the people that are spending like overnight in the school. And either you're competing with them, and at some point you guys kind of like, you develop a weird mutual respect where it's like, oh, you're here overnight all the time, I'm here overnight all the time. I like the way you did this, you like the way I did this, and you just kind of trade off skills. And then basically that's kind of what gets you to...
That's what pushes the level.
I think so. Like,
Okay.
I think I'm lucky about the people I was in class with, and then actually we would all try to time our classes together. So it's like, if you're going on holiday this term, we come back this term, let's try to get in this class together.
Okay.
Because I know that like you're very intense and I'm the same way. So
Okay, we're going to feed off of each other.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there were a few times when I dipped off from a couple of core people.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, all right, this is fun, but it's not the same.
Okay.
Like those core people were really crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you just go off of that.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Your tutors at that time, were they part-time, they like full-time designers, part-time tutors,
Yeah.
or were they ex-designers, or were they academics, or?
I think every single person was making money somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think.
No, but I mean, I'm not.
I don't think there were full-time teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, there was maybe like one or two that were full-time teachers, but in general, yeah, most of them are either active or they were active not too long ago.
But so they've got the credentials. They are like.
Oh yeah, you're not getting.
Current, yeah.
I thought it was ridiculous that they let me teach at the school for a bit.
Okay.
But no, it was like basically anyone that's teaching there usually has got the credentials. And I actually think surprisingly a lot of times, like when I was working there as a teacher, like as a young teacher, there was a nice approach too. Like you're kind of you're able to relate to the students a little better sometimes.
Okay.
Because it wasn't that long ago that you did that.
Yes.
So
But what sort of stuff were you teaching? Were they sketch demos, or were they
I was teaching the very first interior design course they get.
Okay.
Or sorry, the second interior design course they get.
Okay.
But it was actually really cool because it worked with the way that I like to work as well. So you spend the first 7 or so weeks developing a design from sketches. So the first 7 weeks is a lot of feedback.
Okay.
Maybe you try to like sketch over a couple of people's things just to kind of give them an idea of where they're making mistakes, but you're doing a lot of feedback.
Okay.
It's learning from watching each other, and then also learning from the feedback that the teachers are giving each student. And then the second portion of the class, you transition into going from that sketch to a model.
Okay.
That was actually a lot of fun, because then you can kind of see like, not only are they like struggling trying to like wrangle Alias for the first time, some people genuinely just get it. Like they know exactly what their design's about, and they translate to digital, like, however, it doesn't really matter to them that they don't know how to use the tool.
Okay.
They know exactly what it is that they want, and they're going to figure out how to get it.
Okay.
And it's 7 weeks. They got also an Alias class supporting them. So that's actually, like, you're going from students that have never used Alias to knocking out a digital model at the end of 14 weeks.
I was totally incapable of using Alias at university.
When did you learn it?
I paid a lot of money for like a short course.
Okay.
But I did two. We had an Alias a digital modeling module. I think it was in the second year, and we had to model an existing car. And I literally the center line. It was an Audi TT, so it couldn't be any easier. And the roof, like I couldn't understand why the center line wasn't curvature. The two edges were doing that all the way through. I can't. I wish I had that model now to see it, but it was horrendous. And it was a big. I know, but it was a big anticlimax for me because I was super excited because I was like naturally a 3D person, but I just didn't get it. It's so unintuitive.
No, it is. That's the thing. Like you're doing this you're doing the Audi TT, and then you try to like get it in, and then at one point like it just like looks like it's not the most complex. It's a beautiful car, but it's not the most complex car to like model.
Yes.
But you're just getting your ass handed to you by this program while you're trying to, like it's what you're supposed to do.
I didn't get it. I didn't know what a line was. I didn't know what fucking curvature. I didn't know what curvature was. I didn't know all those terminologies. Like there were all these things that being thrown at me, saying like, is this tangent or like I don't know. I didn't know what any of that stuff was.
But you did that because you wanted to be an alias modeler after uni? Or like, why did you do the alias course?
I did the alias course. I finished uni, middle of the crisis. Well, yeah, it's maybe towards the end of the crisis.
2009, yeah, it was kind of shit time.
Yeah, it was pretty shit. Yeah. And it took me, I was doing like bits and bobs, like freelance stuff here and there. But it took me, I think almost 2 years to get, I was still waiting tables like 2 years later.
Okay.
And it was like out of desperation, like, fuck, I'm in all this debt, I need to make it happen.
Okay, but yeah, like when that happened.
I was working at TGI Fridays, and I borrowed money off another waitress who was a bit older, and she helped me out to go on this really expensive course, and it was like 2 weeks. And I learned quite a lot. I learned how to use the program then. I got a lot out of it. I was super lucky with the tutor that was there, but it was really expensive. And I
Yeah, no.
it was worth, of course, in the end it's worth it, but I still think that you can't really justify the price. And then that was my way into Jaguar. But that I still, after finishing that, so that course was also you were doing it on the premise that they were going to help you find a job afterwards, and they fucking didn't.
Okay.
So I'd like now gone and borrowed this more money off this other waitress, and I was still waiting tables.
It's like a real estate seminar.
Dude,
like, yeah, we'll help you get
it was fucking horrific. I was so down. I was like, I decided, okay, well that's it. You know, it's just not going to happen. I'm going to go back to South Africa.
So how'd the Jaguar thing like?
So we used to have people coming in the restaurant all the time because it was in Coventry. So it was like full of JLR people. And I had no end of business cards and promises and like, oh, Sam, you're an awesome dude. I'll sort you out on Monday. And you never fucking hear anything again. And there was this one table. I heard them talking about the design director at the time. I'd served them. They paid. And I got so exhausted of having a conversation with people, you know, of like, oh yeah, I've actually studied car design and you know, I want to, can you help me out? And I was like, fuck, you have to go and speak to these people because you just don't fucking know, like this could be it. So I went up to them and I was like, right guys, there's fucking 6 of you on this table. One of you guys needs to give me a fucking interview. And there was one girl on the table who was working for an agency. She gave me a business card and she's like, there's my business card. Send me an email on Monday. I'm not making any promises, but I'll see what I can do. And that Thursday evening, I got a phone call while I was at work, and they were like, can you get to Whitley tomorrow morning, like for an interview? And I'm like, I've got nothing prepared. Like I don't actually even have she's like, just fucking get there. It doesn't matter. And I showed up. And I actually had a Jaguar project that I'd done, and it just so happened that it was with the digital modeler at the time, and I was like talking about all the stuff, and he was just like, "Dude, cut the bullshit. Like, when can you start?" And that was it. And I was like, "I can start on Monday." And they were like, "Right, speak to this guy. See you then." And that was it.
So that's kind of probably the cool thing about like alias modeling is it still has that old school approach where you can kind of roll in, and maybe if like the skills are not exactly where you want them to be, like obviously you didn't start where you are now, but there's still that kind of like craftsman apprenticeship relationship. Like someone will take care of you, someone will actually like nurture you. So like when you think about like, for example, like interior design, blah, 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 like you actually have to go to design school, which fantastic as it is, but I think what you're talking about is actually probably a little bit more natural. You probably get a lot more people who's like,
yeah. I think, look, there's some schools, and I think Art Centre is one of them, but there's a French school as well that I don't know. I think it's called ISD. Is it ISD Rubica?
I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever. That fucking place. And that was one of the other schools that stood out to me as well, in terms of like having somebody that's well-rounded. You know, they generally have kind of made up their mind whether or not they want to do exterior or interior, and they can do that. They can do alias pretty fucking well. They can, I guess, do visualization to a point, and they've got a more well-rounded view of the whole thing, but generally pretty focused, you know. We definitely didn't have that. But I was very much going in on the, like it wasn't a permanent job, it was a contract, and it was basically the same, not much more money than I was earning at Fridays, but I didn't give a shit. For me, it was like, I was so grateful to get my foot in the door. You know, I was over the moon. It was like a fucking dream come true. And you know, and they were really good to me. You know, their expectations of me were zero at that point, and it gave me a sense of relief and comfort, knowing that I've got some time to figure all this out. That's where I learned everything. Basically, was in that job. You know, I still. I learned everything on that project in that job.
How much did you feel like your head was underwater when you started?
I was pretty anxious. I was really anxious. But the thing is, and here's the thing, because I was getting paid fuck all, and I made it like, you know, I was straight up with them. You know, I was like, that's kind of where I'm at. And, you know, and they were, I didn't have that sense of panic, you know, and I think, had I gone in as a designer, maybe it would have been a fucking completely different story, for sure. But dude, yeah, I don't know. I think
that story only exists like in your head.
Maybe. That's at least how I felt. Like I got in there and I was like, there's all these people and like guys not only my age but younger than me, and some of them. I mean, there was one or two guys there was a few of them that I was at university with, and I really felt like. I felt inferior to everybody, you know. I really did.
What do you mean, like inferior?
Inferior, like I really felt like below everybody. Like I was like, I
See, I think that's the shit that's like always. It's just always in your head. Like it's more like finding the lane, and that's kind of maybe the one thing I wish I knew in school, because then like all of a sudden you have. All right, everyone graduates and like they do that thing where it's like, oh, the top 3 guys get to go to the OEMs. Dude, but also some people were just not meant to be there. Like you can see it in their sketches and what they draw. They want to do motorcycles or like they want to do boats.
Or bicycles.
Bicycles. Dude, and they all find their lane.
Yeah.
Like especially after school. That's the really weird thing about being in school.
Yeah.
Is like you're forcing yourself to fit into like one of these 2 or 3 boxes.
Yeah.
And then you get out and then you're like, all right, I didn't get one of those jobs.
Yeah.
And then you're like panicking for like a week or 2.
Yeah.
And then every single one of them that I talk to, like there are some people that are at like Nike, Adidas, dude, unbelievably happy. Like they're wearing their own shoes that less than a year out of school, they're like, oh yeah, I did these. And I'm just like.
I was open to all of that stuff. But the thing is, as I said, like my portfolio was just totally unfocused. Like I would have loved to being a shoe designer. You know, I almost got a job as a yacht designer. It was down to me and another guy, and unfortunately the other guy got it, or fortunately the way things panned out. But I would have been over the moon to do something like that. But I didn't have anybody's, again, it sounds like I'm finger pointing, and maybe I am, but nobody sat down with me and said, dude, if you want to be a shoe designer, fucking focus on having a bunch of shoes. There was an interview when I was still at university, after I'd finished, we had a visiting lecturer who was the head of Land Rover before Jerry McGovern, Jeff Upex. And I went to go see him and I was like, dude, like I fucking need help. Like, what advice would you give me? And he said basically that thing that you've got all these different things in there. Instead of going like, instead of making it easier for the viewer to say, okay, he's really interested in doing interiors, or he's really interested in doing city cars, or whatever the case is. And then you've got like 5% at the end, like, by the way, these things I'm also a bit interested in, but it's still obvious that you focused on this one particular avenue. And I just had like a mishmash of all sorts of stuff, and it was like jack of all trades, master of none, it was totally like that.
Yeah, I had a strange conversation with one of the teachers at Art Center. Dude will go unnamed, but yeah, like it was when I first had said, all right, I'm just going to do interior design. I'm done with exterior. It's not working for me. It's not something that I'm finding my flow in. And he was just like, oh yeah, like you want to do interior design? It's kind of like giving up. I was like,
dude, that's the thing. It was like kind of viewed like that back, and it was so. That's why I said it was really refreshing seeing people over here that are like, that's what I wanted to do. Sorry.
No. That was the first conversation, and then like 2 years later, he's like all sitting there like completely proud, like, oh yeah, like I always knew you were gonna make it, and I'm just like, yeah. And then we had a conversation about a couple other students who were going, again, like a different route. We had a couple of students that were choosing to do clay modeling, which is not really like a formal course at Art Center, or maybe it is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was that little bit of like, oh yeah, he's doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but what if you actually just gave him the chance to find his own lane, figure out what works for him? That specific student I think he graduated and he had like 5 or 6 job offers to like pick from. And then you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, because he just did exactly what made sense to him.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, same person. Like you look at his life and you're like, dude, you're living a really nice life. Like it could have gone really badly if you had forced yourself into one of those boxes.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I would have, like with regards to clay modeling, that was something else that I was really, really interested in, but I didn't know anything about it. And if I'd had the opportunity at that time, I would have 100%, I would have loved to have done that, really. It was, and I would, to have that mentality of like you giving up or like you haven't made it because you are doing modeling or visualization, whatever the case is, that sort of, I don't subscribe to that at all.
It's like trying to be like heavy metal, like as music was transitioning to something else. It's okay, if you're able to do that, that's fantastic. But if you find that you're better fit to do something else, you should probably just do that.
100%. You have to be I think you have to be self-aware enough as well, which is difficult at that age, at that stage of your life. And especially if you don't really, you've got no fucking idea about what the inside of a studio looks like and what that ecosystem looks like, I didn't know about it. I didn't even know there was a visualization department. I mean, it was pretty new at that stage. Like I think when I started there was no more than 6 people in the Viz department. It was really in its infancy. But I didn't even know that something like that existed. And now, of course, it's like, I don't know how many people there are there now, but there's over, I think, 30 or 40, no, maybe 50 people there because they're pretty much creating movies, like full scale fucking ad agency level movies. And you need a lot of people.
Yeah, that's usually the department. I'm like, if I could be anywhere else, I would want to actually jump into that. I don't think I have the patience for it, but
yeah. And the thing, I'm also really interested in it as well, and they do some very cool shit. The thing is, I find when I've spoken to the Viz guys like that we were working with here, for example, in Germany, nobody could really. You have to know all these different things. It's not like as a digital modeler, you've got the luxury of like you've got one thing you need to do, and you need to learn obviously you need to understand form and design and all that sort of stuff, but you need to learn one program. In visualization, it's like Maya, After Effects, fucking now it's game engines, or like, and I just don't have the mental capacity to like learn all those things, you know.
I think that's what I like about it. It's still a little bit like Wild West. Like you're like, oh yeah, I know this one tool that I'm doing. Like it's just strange. Like it's kind of like the magic department. Like we're sitting there, we're doing these two things. Like I'm doing a drawing, you're making the model, and then you go in there and they just kind of turn the switch on it.
Yeah. It really brings it to life. I mean, the shit that they're doing now is mega. It's, but it is like a bit of a dark art. I mean, like in a lot of the studios you work in now, they're guys that have come from the movie industry.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about it.
That's really cool. But it's like, what should I learn? Like, I don't know. What do you want to do? And it's like, I don't know. Like, what do you do? Like, you don't just press the make Finding Nemo button?
It's fun to hang out with somebody that's making what you're asking them for seem like child's play. Like, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Like, you approach them and they're just like, dude, I work on movies. Like, yeah.
It's no problem.
Yeah, it's always no problem.
Yeah.
That's the really cool thing about it.
Yeah.